The Mediterranean sun hung heavy in the cloudless sky, its rays filtering through the ornate pergola of Terrazza del Sol, creating a lacework of light and shadow across the pristine white tablecloths. It was the kind of perfect afternoon that made the city's elite forget about boardrooms and deadlines, if only for the length of a leisurely lunch. But on this particular Tuesday, as the clock tower chimed 1:30, a small voice would pierce through the comfortable bubble of privilege and change everything. "Excuse me, miss, can I eat your leftovers?" The words came from a child who stood at the invisible boundary between two worlds, the manicured terrace with its potted olive trees and jasmine-scented air, and the harsh reality of the street just beyond the decorative iron fence. She was a study in contrast that would haunt anyone who truly looked. Golden hair that should have been in pigtails for school picture day hung limp and tangled around a face too thin, too knowing for her 8 years. Her gray coat, obviously a donation meant for someone much larger, swallowed her small frame like a fabric embrace she'd never received from human arms. Emma didn't know that this moment, this question born of desperate hunger and fading hope, would become the first note in a symphony of redemption. All she knew was that her stomach had stopped growling and started aching, that Michael was waiting in their hiding spot, getting weaker by the day, and that the elegant woman sitting alone looked sadder than anyone surrounded by such abundance should look. Victoria Chun sat at her usual table, the one in the corner where the jasmine grew thickest, where she could see everything but remain relatively unseen. At 35, she had achieved everything her immigrant parents had dreamed of when they arrived with nothing but determination and calloused hands. The law degree from Harvard, the partnership at Chun and Associates, the penthouse apartment with its view of the city lights, all of it was theirs as much as hers, except they hadn't lived to see any of it. Her dark brown hair was cut in a precise bob that never moved, even in the warm breeze that made other diners constantly tuck strands behind their ears. It was a metaphor for her entire existence. Everything in place, everything controlled, everything perfect on the surface. The Armani suit she wore cost more than most people's monthly rent, but it felt like armor she couldn't remove. The white wine in her crystal glass remained untouched, a prop and performance of successful life that felt increasingly hollow. She had been picking at her pan-seared salmon, moving the microgreens around the plate in an unconscious pattern that her therapist would probably say meant something about her inability to nurture herself. The irony wasn't lost on her. Here she was, surrounded by more food than she could eat, while somewhere her parents' ghosts whispered about the days they shared a single bowl of rice and called it a feast. The restaurant itself was a testament to how far she'd come and how lost she'd become. Terrazza del Sol wasn't just a place to eat. It was a statement. The kind of establishment where deals worth millions were sealed over handshakes and Annika formula, where the waitstaff knew your name, your usual order, and exactly how much ice you preferred in your Pellegrino. The outdoor terrace was a masterpiece of calculated casualness, weathered wooden beams that had been artificially aged, Italian marble tables that looked rustic but cost a fortune, and herbs growing in antique copper planters that perfumed the air with rosemary and thyme. But Emma saw none of this. Her world had shrunk to the size of survival, measured in found meals and safe corners to sleep. She had been watching the restaurant for 3 days, learning its rhythms like a street musician learns which corners bring the most coins. She knew that the lunch rush ended at 2, that the busboys were less vigilant near the back entrance, and that wealthy people often order more than they could eat, a casual abundance that could mean the difference between her brother's survival and slow starvation. Standing there in her too-big coat, clutching the teddy bear she'd named Mr. Buttons after the only remaining eye, Emma represented everything Victoria had spent her adult life trying to distance herself from. The fear of not having enough, the shame of being different, the constant calculation of whether you belonged. Yet there was something in the child's posture, a dignity that transcended circumstance, that made Victoria's carefully constructed walls tremble. The moment stretched like taffy in the afternoon heat. Around them, the restaurant continued its choreographed dance of privilege. A waiter glided by with a bottle of wine, worth more than Emma had seen in her entire life. 2 tables over, businessmen laughed at jokes that weren't funny, sealing deals that would make them richer, while somewhere a little boy waited for his sister to return with food. The fountain in the center of the terrace gurgled pleasantly, its sound mixing with the distant hum of traffic and the closer murmur of satisfied diners. Victoria's hand moved to summon the maitre d'. It would be so easy to have the child removed, to return her email and her loneliness and her safe, sterile existence. But something in Emma's eyes, not pleading, just patiently waiting for the verdict of a stranger's compassion, made her pause. In that gaze, Victoria saw her mother's eyes the day she'd been turned away from a grocery store for not speaking enough English. She saw her father's eyes when he came home from 16-hour shifts at the factory, too tired to eat the dinner he'd worked to provide. Without a word, Victoria pushed the plate toward the edge of the table. The salmon was barely touched, the baby potatoes still warm, the delicate sauce pooling like a small, savory lake. It was more food than Emma had seen on one plate in months. The child's face transformed with a gratitude so pure it was almost painful to witness. But what happened next would be the first sign that this was no ordinary street child, no simple story of charity given and received. Instead of grabbing the plate and running, as any adult watching might have expected, Emma carefully pulled a crumpled napkin from her pocket. With movements that spoke of ritual and love, she divided the food precisely in half, wrapping one portion with the same care a jeweler might show with diamonds. "For my brother," she whispered, the words carrying across the space between them like a bridge. Victoria watched mesmerized as the child handled the fork with delicacy that suggested she hadn't always eaten from dumpsters and handouts. There was a story there, written in the way Emma held her utensils, in the straight spine that hunger hadn't managed to bend, in the way she carefully wiped her mouth after each bite. This wasn't just poverty. This was a fall from grace, a story of loss that went beyond material things. If you believe that a single act of kindness can ripple outward in ways we never imagined, maybe it's time to join us on this journey. Because what unfolded next would challenge everything both Victoria and Emma thought they knew about family, belonging, and the courage it takes to trust again. The child ate slowly, savoring each bite as if trying to make the moment last. Victoria found herself unable to look away. Her phone forgotten, her usual lunch hour calls ignored. When was the last time she had tasted her food instead of just consuming it? Between meetings? When had eating become just another task to complete rather than an experience to cherish? Watching Emma, she felt a strange envy for the child's ability to find joy in something so simple. "What's your brother's name?" The question surprised Victoria as much as it did Emma. She hadn't meant to engage, hadn't meant to make this personal, but the words were out, floating between them like an invitation. Emma looked up, salmon sauce down the corner of her mouth, her blue eyes wide with surprise that the elegant lady was speaking to her. "Michael," she said softly. "He's 6. He likes to draw, but we don't have any more crayons." The words tumbled out in a rush, as if she'd been holding them in for so long they fermented into urgency. Victoria felt something crack inside her chest, a fissure in the armor she'd worn for so long she'd forgotten it wasn't part of her skin. "And where is Michael now?" "He's waiting for me, in our safe place. He knows not come out during the day. Too many people might see." Emma's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "We have to stay together. They said if they find us, they'll split us up, put us in different homes. But I promised Mama I'd take care of him. I promise." The weight of that promise, carried by 8-year-old shoulders, hit Victoria like a physical blow. She thought of all the promises she'd made, to make partner by 30, to build more hours than any other associate, to never be vulnerable, never be poor, never be powerless again. But had she ever promised anything that mattered as much as a dying mother's wish to a daughter too young to understand what she was taking on? "How long have you been taking care of him?" "Since January. Mama got sick before Christmas. She tried to hide it, but I knew. She couldn't get out of bed anymore, couldn't work. Then one morning," Emma's voice trailed off, but her eyes finished the sentence. "One morning, her mother didn't wake up. One morning, an 8-year-old became a parent to her younger brother. One morning, childhood ended with the finality of closed eyes that would never open again." Victoria's hand moved unconsciously to her chest, pressing against the pain that bloomed there. January. These children had been alone for 6 months, surviving winter on the streets, staying hidden from authorities, from predators, from a system that would help them by tearing apart the only family they had left. And somehow, impossibly, they'd managed to remain invisible, sustained by the kind of love that most people only read about in books. "Your coat," Victoria said suddenly, noticing something she'd missed before. The gray coat wasn't just too big. It was a man's coat. "Was it your father's?" Emma's small body stiffened, her fingers tightening on Mr. Buttons. "No. Father left when Michael was a baby. Said he couldn't handle it. Mama found this coat at the shelter store last winter. She said it would keep me warm until..." Again, the sentence died unfinished. Until she got better. Until spring came. Until a miracle happened. But miracles, Emma had learned, were just another fairy tale adults told to make children feel better about a world that had no magic left in it. The waiter approached, his expression professionally neutral, but his eyes broadcasting displeasure at the scene. Victoria's lunch companion was not the caliber of guest Terraza del Sol preferred to serve. But one look from Victoria, the kind of look that had made opposing counsel reconsider their positions in million-dollar lawsuits, sent him retreating without a word. "Would you and Michael like to have lunch with me tomorrow?" The invitation surprised Victoria even more than her first question. What was she doing? She had a deposition tomorrow, 3 client meetings, a partner's dinner she couldn't miss. Her life was scheduled in 6-minute increments, billed at $800 an hour. She didn't have time for lunch with homeless children. But Emma's face lit up like Times Square on New Year's Eve. And Victoria realized that maybe, just maybe, she'd been billing her hours to the wrong account. Maybe success wasn't measured in billable time, but in moments like this, when a child's smile could make you remember why you wanted to practice law in the first place. To help people, to make a difference, to matter in ways that went beyond profit margins and partnership draws. Really? Both of us? At a real table. Emma's questions tumbled over each other like puppies. "Michael won't be any trouble, I promise. I've taught him manners. Mama insisted we always remember our manners, no matter what. She said they were free to keep and impossible to lose if you practice them enough." Victoria found herself smiling. It was the last time she'd smiled genuinely, not the practice expression she wore for clients and colleagues. "Yes, really. Both of you. Right here at this table. Noon tomorrow. Can you remember that?" Emma nodded solemnly, as if she'd been entrusted with state secrets. "Noon tomorrow. We'll be here. And miss..." She paused, suddenly shy. "Thank you. Not just for the food. For seeing me. Most people, they look through me like I'm made of air. But you saw me." As Emma carefully gathered the wrapped food for her brother and disappeared back into the city's shadows, Victoria sat alone at her perfect table with its perfect view and realized she'd been the one made of air. All these years of building a life that looked successful from the outside, while inside she'd been slowly disappearing, becoming as insubstantial as the image she projected. But a child in a gray coat had seen through her expensive camouflage to the emptiness beneath, and somehow, impossibly, had offered her a chance at something real. We have more stories like this coming. So don't forget to hit the like button and turn on notifications, because tomorrow's lunch will begin a journey none of them could have imagined. The next day, Victoria arrived at the restaurant 30 minutes early, a behavior so unlike her that her assistant had called twice to make sure she wasn't ill. She'd actually gone shopping the night before. Not at Barney's or Saks, where she usually bought her armor, but to a children's store where she stood helplessly in front of displays of clothes and sizes she could only guess at. The saleswoman, seeing her confusion, had gently asked if she was shopping for her children. The no had stuck in her throat like a fishbone. She finally settled on 2 sets of clothes that looked like they might fit, some basic supplies, and, in a moment of whimsy that surprised her, a box of 64 crayons and a sketch pad for Michael. Now the bag sat under the table like evidence of a crime she wasn't sure she was ready to commit. Was she helping or interfering? Was this compassion, or just another way to control a situation that made her uncomfortable? At exactly noon, 2 small figures appeared at the edge of the terrace. Emma had clearly tried to clean them both up. Their faces were scrubbed pink, their hair damp and combed. Michael was smaller than Victoria had expected, with the same golden hair as his sister, but eyes that were green instead of blue. He clutched Emma's hand with one of his and held a piece of paper in the other. Even from across the terrace, Victoria could see his body trembling. Not from cold in the warm afternoon, but from fear. Emma led him forward with the kind of gentle authority that spoke of long practice. "It's okay, Mikey." Victoria heard her whisper. "She's nice. She gave us food yesterday, remember? The salmon you said tasted like clouds." They approached the table like deer approaching a salt lick, drawn by need but ready to bolt at the first sign of danger. Victoria's heart clenched at the sight of them. In daylight, their condition was even more apparent. Both children were too thin, their clothes clean but threadbare. Michael's shoes had holes covered with duct tape, and Emma's jeans were hemmed with staples. But it was their eyes that told the real story. Too old, too wary, too knowing of the world's cruelties. "Hello, Emma. This must be Michael." Victoria kept her voice soft, the way she'd learned to speak to skittish witnesses. "I'm glad you both came." Michael pressed closer to his sister, but held out the paper in his hand. It was a drawing made with what looked like a stub of pencil on the back of a discarded flyer. Despite the crude materials, the image was remarkably detailed. A woman sitting at a table under hanging vines, her face kind, a halo of light around her dark hair. It was Victoria, seen through the eyes of a 6-year-old artist who'd received his first full meal in days because of her kindness. "He drew it last night," Emma explained. "After we ate, he wanted to say thank you." Victoria took the drawing with hands that trembled slightly. When was the last time someone had given her a gift that wasn't calculated to gain favor or access? This crumpled piece of paper, created by a hungry child in whatever shelter they'd found for the night, was worth more than all the crystal paperweights and designer desk accessories that cluttered her office. "It's beautiful, Michael. You're very talented." She looked at the boy directly, seeing him stiffen less at the praise. "Would you like to see some real crayons?" The transformation in Michael's face was like watching the sun break through storm clouds. When Victoria pulled out the box of 64 colors, his green eyes went wide with wonder. "All different colors," he whispered, as if afraid speaking too loudly might make them disappear. "All different colors," Victoria confirmed. "And they're yours to keep. The paper, too." As the waiter approached, the same one from yesterday, his disapproval now tinged with curiosity, Victoria ordered with decisiveness that brooked no argument. "Lunch for 3 with extra portions." "Children's menu?" "No, these children would eat real food, good food, the kind their mother would have given them if she could. And chocolate milk." When was the last time they'd had chocolate milk? Watching them eat was a masterclass in contradiction. Their hunger was evident in every eager bite, but their manners were impeccable. Napkins in laps, small bites, chewing with mouths closed. Their mother had given them tools for a life they no longer lived, and they wielded those tools like talismans against complete despair. "Emma tells me you like to draw," Victoria said to Michael, trying to draw him out of his shell. "What else do you like to draw besides people?" Michael looked at Emma for permission before answering. "Houses," he said softly. "I draw houses with families in them. And dogs. We had a dog before Mama went to heaven. His name was Biscuit, but we couldn't keep him. Another loss in a string of losses." Victoria wondered how many times these children had said goodbye, how many pieces of their former life had been stripped away. First their father, then their home, their dog, their mother, their safety. And yet here they sat, still holding on to each other, still finding beauty in boxes of crayons and chocolate milk. "Tell me about your mother," Victoria found herself saying. It was the kind of personal question she never asked, the kind that opened doors better left closed. But these children had already walked through her carefully constructed walls. What was one more breach? Emma and Michael exchanged looks, conducting one of those silent conversations that siblings perfect when words become dangerous. Finally, Emma spoke. Mama was a teacher before she got sick. She taught 2nd grade at PS 84. The kids loved her because she did voices when she read stories and let them have dance parties on Friday afternoons. "She made the best spaghetti," Michael added, emboldened by the topic, "with meatballs as big as tennis balls." And she sang while she cooked. Her voice sounded like bells. She was from Italy, Emma continued. Came here when she was young to study. Met our father at college. He was studying to be an architect, but... She shrugged, a gesture too world-weary for 8-year-old shoulders. He said life got too hard. That's what Mama told us. That sometimes people leave not because they don't love you, but because they don't love themselves enough to stay. Victoria's throat tightened. The wisdom in that statement, filtered through a child's understanding, hit her with unexpected force. How many times had she left relationships, friendships, opportunities for connection? Not because she didn't care, but because caring meant risking the kind of pain she'd sworn never to feel again. Would you have done the same? I'd love to know what you think, because what happened next would test every assumption Victoria had about strength, family, and what we owe to each other. As lunch progressed, the children slowly relaxed. Michael, fueled by food and the promise of artistic supplies, began to open up. He told Victoria about the pigeons he befriended in the park, naming each one and describing their personalities. Emma shared stories about the makeshift school she created, teaching younger homeless children their letters using newspapers and charcoal from old fire pits. Their resilience was both heartbreaking and inspiring, a testament to the human spirit's ability to find light in the darkest corners. Where are you staying now? Victoria asked carefully, Lawyer's instincts warring with newfound maternal ones. She needed information, but didn't want to spook them. Emma's guard went back up immediately. We're safe, she said quickly. We found a place nobody uses. It's dry and hidden. We're careful. I'm sure you are. You've done an amazing job taking care of each other. But winter will come again and we'll manage. Emma's voice carried a firmness that belonged in a boardroom, not coming from a child. We always do. Mama said the most important thing was staying together. As long as we're together, we can handle anything. Victoria recognized the wall going up and backed off. Trust. She was learning. Couldn't be demanded or bought or negotiated. It had to be earned. One meal at a time, one kept promise at a time. Of course, I didn't mean to push. How about we make this a regular thing? Lunch every day, same time, same table? The hope that flared in both children's eyes was quickly tamped down by experience. Why? Emma asked bluntly. What do you want from us? It was a fair question. In their world, nothing came free. Every kindness had a price. Every offer came with conditions. Victoria thought about her own life, where every relationship was transactional, every interaction calculated for maximum benefit. When had she become the kind of person from whom children expected ulterior motives? I don't want anything from you, she said slowly, testing the truth of the words as she spoke them. Maybe I need something from you. I eat alone every day at this table. I work all the time. I don't have any family. Eating with you two yesterday was the nicest lunch I've had in years. So maybe, if you're willing, we could help each other. You need meals, and I need to remember what it's like to care about something more than billable hours. Emma studied her with eyes that had learned to read people as a survival skill. Whatever she saw in Victoria's face must have passed the test, because she nodded slowly. Okay, but if you try to call anyone, if you try to split us up, we'll disappear. And you'll never find us again. I understand. No calls, no authorities, just lunch. And so began a routine that would slowly reshape 3 lives. Every day at noon, Victoria would arrive at Terrazza del Sol to find Emma and Michael waiting. Every day, they would share a meal and pieces of their stories. Michael's drawings evolved from pencil scratches to elaborate crayon masterpieces that covered their table. Emma revealed herself to be not just bright but brilliant, with a mind that devoured information and made connections that astounded Victoria. The restaurant staff, initially resistant, began to soften. The waiter started bringing extra bread without being asked. The chef would sometimes send out special treats for the little artists. Other diners still stared, but Victoria found she cared less and less about their opinions. What mattered were the moments when Michael laughed at something silly, when Emma forgot to be vigilant and just acted like the child she was. If you believe that love can grow in the most unexpected gardens, maybe it's time to join us on this journey, because the seeds being planted over those lunches would bloom in ways none of them expected. 2 weeks into their routine, Victoria made a decision that surprised her. She arrived at lunch with a rolling suitcase that drew curious looks from everyone. Inside were practical things: warm clothes that actually fit, proper shoes, backpacks, toiletries, but also books, real books, the kind Emma's eyes devoured information from. And for Michael, an art set that made him actually squeal with joy. "These are gifts," Victoria said firmly when Emma started to protest. "No strings, no conditions, just things you need." But it was what happened the following week that marked a real turning point. Victoria arrived to find Emma in tears and Michael nowhere to be seen. The story came out in gulps and sobs. Michael was sick, really sick, fever, cough, the kind of illness that in a warm home with medicine was an inconvenience, but on the streets could be deadly. Emma had been trying to nurse him with stolen Tylenol and prayers, but he was getting worse. "Where is he?" Victoria's voice was calm, but inside, her heart was racing. This was the moment that mattered. Follow the rules and call for help, knowing it would mean losing their trust forever? Or, "I can't tell you. You'll call someone. They'll take him away." Emma's desperation was a living thing, filling the space between them. Victoria made a choice that went against every logical, legal instinct she had. "I won't call anyone. But Emma, he needs help. Real help. Let me see him. Just see him. I promise, no authorities. Just me." The war on Emma's face was painful to watch. Trust battling experience, need fighting fear. Finally, desperation won. She stood up, gathering her things. "If you betray us..." "I won't." The abandoned building where they'd been living was worse than Victoria's darkest imaginings. A former office space, condemned and forgotten, with broken windows patched with cardboard and plastic. But in one corner, Emma had created a small miracle. Using salvage materials, she'd built a little home. Mattresses raised off the floor on pallets, their few possessions neatly organized, Michael's drawings covering the walls like the world's most poignant gallery. Michael lay on one of the mattresses, his small body burning with fever, his breathing labored. Victoria's medical knowledge was limited to workplace first aid, but even she could see this was serious. Pneumonia, probably, without antibiotics, without proper care. "We need to get him help," she said gently. "Emma, this is beyond what you can handle alone. No hospitals. They'll call social services. I know a doctor," Victoria interrupted. "A friend from law school who works at a private clinic. Discreet. No questions asked if I vouch for you. But we need to go now." It was a lie. Dr. Sarah Kim was a friend. They'd barely spoken since graduation. But she owed Victoria a favor from a legal matter, and Victoria was prepared to cash in every chip she had if it meant saving this child. The next hours were a blur of begging, negotiating, and calling in favors Victoria had been saving for career advancement. Dr. Kim, initially reluctant, took one look at Michael and her medical oath overrode her reservations. For antibiotics, breathing treatments, the kind of care that meant the difference between life and tragedy. "He'll need to stay at least overnight," Dr. Kim said quietly, pulling Victoria aside. "This is serious. Another day or two without treatment." She didn't need to finish. "They can't be separated," Victoria said firmly. "Emma stays with him. This isn't a hotel. I'll pay whatever it costs. Set up a private room. Emma stays, or I take both of them out of here right now." Dr. Kim studied her old classmate, seeing something in Victoria's face that made her nod. "You've changed," she said simply. "The Victoria Chun I knew wouldn't have. The Victoria Chun you knew was an idiot." Victoria cut her off. "Please, just help them." That night, sitting in an uncomfortable chair, watching Emma keep vigil over her brother, Victoria had what her therapist would later call a breakthrough. These children had given her something all her success hadn't, a purpose beyond herself. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about billable hours or partnership tracks or the endless climb to a summit that kept moving higher. She was just present, needed, part of something that mattered. Michael's fever broke near dawn. His first coherent words were, "Emma, did you eat?" Even sick, even small, his first thought was for his sister. Victoria watched Emma cry for the second time, but these were tears of relief, of a burden briefly lifted from shoulders too young to carry it. "He's going to be okay," Dr. Kim confirmed after morning rounds. "But he can't go back to wherever you've been staying. His immune system is compromised. Another infection like this." Victoria made a decision that would have seemed impossible a month ago. "They'll stay with me." "Victoria, you can't just watch me." But it was Emma who surprised everyone. "No," she said firmly. "We can't. You've been kind, more than kind. But we're not your responsibility. We're not anybody's responsibility but our own." The pride in that statement, the fierce independence born of abandonment and survival, broke Victoria's heart. How did you convince a child who'd learned to expect nothing that it was okay to accept help? How did you bridge the gap between charity and family? "Emma," Victoria said carefully, "do you know what a partnership is?" The girl's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Like in business?" "Exactly like in business. Partners work together. They each bring something valuable. They support each other. What if we made a partnership? You and Michael need a safe place to stay and recover. I need to remember how to be human, how to care about something more than winning cases. You'd be helping me as much as I'm helping you." It was Michael who broke the stalemate. Still weak but clear-eyed, he looked at his sister. "She drew us as a family," he said softly. "In my picture. I didn't show you, but I drew her with us. Like she belonged." Emma looked at her brother, then at Victoria, then at the sterile hospital room that was still safer than anywhere they'd been in months. "A partnership," she said slowly, testing the word, "with terms. Conditions, not charity." "Whatever terms you want," Victoria agreed quickly. What followed was possibly the most unusual negotiation in Victoria's legal career. Emma, 8 years old and fierce with protective love, laid out her conditions. They would stay with Victoria but contribute chores, cooking when they could, no freeloading. They would go to school but together, in the same building. They would accept help but not pity. And if at any point Victoria tried to separate them or make decisions without them, the partnership was void. Victoria agreed to everything, hiding her smile at the serious way Emma insisted on a handshake to seal the deal. What the child didn't know was that Victoria would have agreed to anything, given anything, to keep these two safe. Somewhere between that first shared meal and this hospital room negotiation, they become essential to her in a way she was only beginning to understand. We have more stories like this coming, so don't forget to hit the like button and turn on notifications, because what happened when they left the hospital would test every promise they'd made to each other. The penthouse apartment that had always felt too big, too empty, too much like a museum of Victoria's success, transformed the moment Emma and Michael walked through the door. Michael's eyes went wide at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, while Emma immediately began calculating. Escape routes, hiding places, all the survival instincts that wouldn't switch off just because the danger had passed. "Your rooms are down here," Victoria said, leading them down a hallway she rarely used. She'd spent the previous day frantically preparing, buying beds and decorations, trying to make the sterile guest rooms feel welcoming. "You each have your own, but they're connected if you want to leave the door open." Emma stood in the doorway of what was now her room, not moving. It was painted a soft blue with white furniture and shelves waiting to be filled with books. A desk sat by the window with a view of the park below. It was a room of a cherished child, not a homeless survivor, and the cognitive dissonance was overwhelming. "I don't understand," Emma said finally, her voice small. "Why are you doing this?" "Really?" Victoria sat on the bed, patting the space beside her. After a moment's hesitation, Emma joined her. "Do you want the lawyer answer or the real answer?" "The real one." "Okay, the real answer is that I'm scared too. I'm scared I'm going to mess this up. I'm scared you'll leave. I'm scared I'll turn back into the person I was before you asked me for my leftovers. Because that person, she was successful and empty and so lonely she couldn't even admit it to herself. You and Michael. You've given me something I didn't even know I was missing. A reason to come home that isn't just work. A reason to care about tomorrow that isn't just about winning cases. So I'm being selfish, really. I need you both as much as you need a safe place to stay. Emma studied her with those two wise eyes. Adults don't usually tell the truth like that. I'm learning that being an adult doesn't mean having all the answers. Sometimes it just means being brave enough to admit when you're lost. That night, Victoria woke to the sound of crying. She found Michael in Emma's bed, both children huddled together like they had for so many months. Bad dream, Emma explained, not meeting Victoria's eyes. He dreams about Mama sometimes. Victoria hesitated in the doorway, unsure of her place in this grief that predated her. Then Michael's small voice cut through the darkness. You could stay too, if you want. Mama used to stay when the dreams were bad. And so Victoria found herself sitting on the edge of a child's bed at 3 a.m, telling stories about her own mother to two orphans who understood loss in ways that transcended age. She told them about a woman who came to America with nothing but hope, who cleaned offices at night so she could go to school during the day, who died of a heart attack at her sewing machine 2 weeks before Victoria made partner. She would have loved you both, Victoria said softly. She added this saying, family isn't just blood. It's the people who show up when the world goes dark. Is that what we are? Michael asked sleepily. Family. Victoria looked at these two children who had crashed into her carefully ordered life and reorganized everything. I think maybe we are. The next months were a dance of adjustment, trust building, and small miracles. Emma and Michael started school together as promised at a private academy that Victoria chose as much for its kindness as its academics. The first day, Emma stood at the gates like a soldier preparing for battle. Michael's hand clutched in hers. You don't have to be perfect, Victoria told her. You just have to be yourself. Being myself is what got us kicked out of everywhere else, Emma replied, but she squared her shoulders and walked through those gates like she owned them. The call came 3 hours later. Emma had corrected her teacher's math during class and started a minor rebellion when she insisted the textbook was wrong. Victoria left a partner meeting to handle it, surprising herself at how little she cared about the disapproving looks from colleagues. She's brilliant, the teacher said, more awed than upset. Genuinely gifted, but also traumatized, protective, unwilling to accept traumatized, protective, unwilling to accept authority without question, Victoria finished. She's had to be the adult for too long. We're working on letting her be a child again. The teacher's expression softened. With support, with understanding, she could go far. Both of them could. Michael's artistic abilities are extraordinary for his age, but they need stability, consistency. They'll have it, Victoria promised, meaning it more than any oath she'd ever sworn in court. The real test came in small moments. The first time Michael called her from school, sick and scared, asking for her instead of Emma. The night Emma broke down completely, finally letting out the grief she'd been holding back to be strong for her brother. The family therapy sessions where they all learned to navigate this new configuration of belonging. Victoria's colleagues didn't understand the change. Why was she leaving the office at 6 instead of midnight? Why was she turning down cases that would conflict with school plays and art shows? Her billable hours dropped, her standing in the firm shifted, and she found she didn't care. Success, she was learning, had many definitions. The breakthrough came on a rainy Tuesday, 6 months after that first lunch. Victoria was in court arguing a pro bono case for a family facing eviction when she saw them, Emma and Michael, sitting in the back row, having somehow convinced their school to let them attend. They watched her with such pride, such belonging, that she nearly lost her train of thought. She won the case. But more importantly, as they walked out together, Emma slipped her hand into Victoria's and said, "You were amazing, like a superhero, but with words instead of punches." "You know what?" Victoria replied, squeezing the small hand in hers. "You too are my superheroes. You saved me from a life that looked perfect but felt empty. You taught me that strength isn't about never needing help. It's about being brave enough to accept it when offered." That night at dinner, a chaotic affair with Michael's art supplies covering half the table and Emma reading from a book while eating, Victoria made an announcement. "I've been thinking about adoption." Both children froze. The old fear flickered in Emma's eyes, the instinct to run before being rejected. But Victoria continued quickly. Only if you want it. Only if you're ready. The partnership continues either way. But I like to make it official, legal, permanent. You be Emma and Michael Chun if you choose. No one could ever separate us then. The silence stretched until Michael, in his simple 6-year-old wisdom, asked, "Would you be our mom for real then?" "I think I already am," Victoria said through tears she didn't try to hide. "But this would make sure everyone else knows it too." Emma, the negotiator, the protector, the child who'd aged too fast, looked at her brother, then at Victoria. "Chin Romano," she said firmly. "We keep Mama's name too, so we don't forget where we came from." "Chin Romano it is." Victoria agreed immediately. "That's perfect. You're perfect. Both of you." The adoption process was smooth. Victoria knew the system, had the resources, and most importantly, had the children's trust. The day it was finalized, they stood before a judge who smiled more than anyone had ever seen him smile as he declared them a family in the eyes of the law. But the real celebration came that afternoon at Terraza del Sol, at the same table where it all began. The maitre d' himself brought champagne for Victoria and sparkling juice for the children. The entire staff applauded when they raised their glasses in a toast. "To leftovers," Emma said with a grin that had become more common as the months passed. "To questions that change everything," Victoria added. "To family," Michael shouted, making everyone laugh. As they ate, no longer leftovers, but a feast ordered with joy, other diners kept glancing over. Some recognized the story, having watched its evolution over months of lunches. Others just saw what appeared to be a happy family celebrating something special. None of them could know the journey that had brought them here. The nights of doubt, the moments of breakthrough, the slow building of trust that had transformed 3 strangers into a family. Would you have done the same? I'd love to know what you think. Because the ripples from that one moment of compassion were about to spread even further than any of them imagined. A year later, Victoria stood before a packed conference room, but this wasn't about mergers or acquisitions. This was the launch of the Chin Romano Foundation, dedicated to keeping families together while providing support and resources. Emma sat in the front row, now 9 and even more fiercely intelligent, her notebook filled with ideas instead of survival plans. Michael, 7 and growing into his talents, had created the foundation's logo, 2 hands reaching for each other, forming a heart in the negative space between them. The foundation's first project, Victoria announced, will be a transitional housing complex with on-site tutoring, art therapy, and family counseling. No child should have to choose between safety and staying with their siblings. No parent should have to watch their children scattered because poverty made them vulnerable. The room erupted in applause, but Victoria's eyes were on her children. Emma gave her a thumbs up, the gesture somehow both childish and profound. This had been her idea, refined during one of their many dinner conversations about how to help other families avoid what they'd almost lost. After the presentation, as donors mingled and pled support, a woman approached Victoria hesitantly. She was young, tired-looking, with 2 small children clinging to her legs. "I heard about what you're doing," she said quietly. "My kids and we're about to lose our apartment. I've been so scared they'll be taken from me if I admit I need help. Could we?" Victoria knelt down to the children's level, seeing Emma and Michael in their wary eyes. "What are your names?" she asked gently. As the mother shared their story, Emma appeared at Victoria's side. Without being asked, she took the younger child's hand. "Want to see something cool?" she said. "My brother's artwork is on display over there. He was just like you once. Scared and hungry, but it gets better. I promise." Watching Emma lead the children away, chatting easily about school and art and the cookies on the refreshment table, Victoria felt a hand slip into hers. Michael looked up at her with those green eyes that had first peered at her from behind his sister's protective stance. "We're doing good, right?" he asked. "Helping other kids like us?" "We're doing very good," Victoria confirmed. "But you know what the best part is? We're doing it together." The foundation grew beyond their wildest dreams. Within 2 years, They'd helped over 100 families stay together while getting back on their feet. Emma, now 11, served on a youth advisory board, bringing a perspective that no adult could replicate. Michael's art adorned the walls of every facility, reminders that beauty could bloom even in the hardest circumstances. But it was the small moments that mattered most. Family dinners where they debated everything from homework to human rights. Bedtime stories that had evolved into philosophical discussions about justice and kindness. The way Michael still sometimes crawled into Emma's bed during thunderstorms, and how Victoria would find him there in the morning and feel her heart expand with a love she hadn't known existed. One evening, as they sat at their usual table at Terraza del Sol, a weekly tradition they maintained, Emma pulled out a worn piece of paper. It was a custody agreement she negotiated from her hospital bed years ago, now soft with age and handling. "I've been thinking," she said in that serious way that meant a big thought was coming. "This partnership of ours has yielded excellent returns." Victoria laughed, recognizing her own legal language reflected back at her. "Has it now? How do you figure?" "Well, we've tripled our initial family investment, expanded into the nonprofit sector, and achieved a happiness rating that's off the charts. I'd say that's a successful venture by any measure." "You know what?" Victoria said, looking at her children, brilliant, resilient, kind Emma and creative, gentle, brave Michael. "I think you're absolutely right. Best deal I ever made." "Even better than the Morrison merger?" Michael asked, referencing a case that had made headlines. "Not even close," Victoria said firmly. "You too are my masterpiece, my purpose, my unexpected everything." As the sun set to the pergola, casting the same dappled light that had witnessed their first meeting, other diners glanced over at their table. Some recognized them from the news stories about the foundation. Others just saw what looked like a normal family enjoying dinner together. None could know that this was sacred ground, the place where a desperate question had cracked open 3 hearts just enough to let love flood in. The waiter, the same one who had once looked at them with such disapproval, brought their dessert with an extra sparkler for celebration. "For the family that taught us all something about seeing people, not circumstances," he said with a wink. Emma raised her glass of lemonade. "To Mom," she said simply, "who saw us when we were invisible." "To you too," Victoria countered, her voice thick with emotion, "who taught me that success without love is just a beautiful kind of failure." "To us," Michael shouted, making them all laugh. "To family." They clinked glasses as the sparkler cast dancing lights across their faces. 3 people who had found each other in the most unlikely way, who had built something beautiful from loss and loneliness, who had discovered that sometimes the smallest voice asking the simplest question can echo loud enough to change everything. If this story touched your heart, remember that all around us are children like Emma and Michael, families struggling to stay together, people one question away from transformation. The Chinramano Foundation is fictional, but the need is real. Every day, in restaurants and streets and shelters around the world, there are voices asking for more than food. They're asking to be seen, to be valued, to be given a chance to show what they could become with just a little help. The question is, when you hear that voice, when you see that need, when you're faced with the choice between looking away and leaning in, what will you do? Will you guard your leftovers and your life, keeping them separate and safe? Or will you push the plate across the table and discover that in feeding another's hunger, you might just satisfy your own? Because here's what Emma and Victoria learned at that table under the pergola. We're all hungry for something. Some hunger for food, others for family, for purpose, for connection, for the chance to matter in someone else's story. And sometimes, just sometimes, when we're brave enough to share what we have, whether a plate of food or an empty heart ready to be filled, we discover that leftovers can become a feast, that questions can become answers, and that strangers can become the family we never knew we were looking for. The sun sets now on Terraza del Sol, but the story continues. In every city, in every moment where privilege and poverty meet, the opportunity exists for transformation. All it takes is someone willing to see, someone willing to ask, someone willing to answer with an open heart instead of closed fist. The smallest voice, the simplest question, the biggest change. Can I eat your leftovers? Sometimes that's all it takes to begin.